The ongoing pandemic has precipitated various socioeconomic challenges impacting people from every demographic. We hope that through this presentation, you will gain a better understanding of the global plight of online post-secondary education.
Hi, my name is Jaffa.
My name is Atsuki.
My name is Rico.
And my name is Sophia, and we are Group Stars.
Speak about our research from the given articles and additional external research. We'll speak about our own research and survey that we conducted on Canadian and Japanese students and professors. We'll go over those results and ways to address the top 5 concerns from the survey. And lastly, we will cover policies and steps to a brighter future.
We conducted research focusing on the structure of Japanese universities and the communication between professors and students. Firstly, I would like to talk about how college life works in terms of our learning environment. Now that a large portion of higher education is using remote learning and teaching, one of the salient features that we should focus on is the lack of communication. According to the article, The Shape of Post-Pandemic University Education by Haruaki Deguchi, a university is a form of business that makes sense only when it provides students physical environment for learning. On the other hand, online learning and teaching are often very convenient for both professors and students. We don't have to commute or wait between classes when attending classes from home. There's a high possibility that we will continue to have online classes even in the post-COVID world, but there are still problems.
Let's move on to talking about unique problems in Japanese university. I'll deal with 2 problems. The first problem is some students cannot take the online courses with sufficient technology conditions. Generally, online courses require more than 20 gigabytes per month. However, according to the research at Rikkyo University, about 14 of students can use less than 20 gigabytes per month. The second problem is more than 80% of private university and vocational schools depends on tuition fees too much. In fact, revenue from tuition fees make up for about 80%. That's why private universities cannot provide tuition even if students are struggling with paying.
As the article provided to us by the TIA Institute indicates, we need universities to reflect on their mission and population to implement change during and after COVID properly. Some key areas to consider when planning for an uncertain future are the 4 sources of capital, which are human, financial, physical, and reputational. I'll quickly go over them. Human, being empathetic of the students and alumni skills and knowledge. Financial, take into consideration the finances available to institutions and students like financial aid. Physical, available buildings, technology, and other physical assets. And lastly, reputational. So that mostly includes mission, values, leadership, and contributions to local community and society as a whole. I also did some extra research at my school library at Queen's University and my community. I found that when initially policies were made for schools and institutions, the government of Canada did not consider providing support for the community if their school was infected. For example, in Kingston, Ontario, when a student was tested positive for COVID, the whole school shut down and a backup plan was not efficiently provided, leading to a challenging experience for students, especially students with disabilities, and professors. Therefore, we need to take into consideration the plans and accessibility of our society and students.
One of the assigned readings highlighted that Canadian schools focused on business continuity models. They sought to finish classes, ensure housing stability for vulnerable students, and continue vital university operations such as research. However, there was a lesser focus on academic continuity. Classes continued with minor improvements, but professors were given a significant amount of discretion, and thus solutions really depended on each university. However, in May of 2020, the Government of Canada created a survey asking students about the impact of COVID-19 on their lives relating to education and work. As you can see on your screen, some important statistics are presented. The government focused on part-time jobs and graduation concerns, but not about online learning, which is the very nature of the new normal. Given that only 15% of students were fully online before COVID-19, we believe that there was a lack of relevant questions about the new normal. And this is why we created our own survey.
We did a survey asking both students and professors about their concerns with the transition to remote learning and the response of the government in facilitating this change. We wanted to reflect official government surveys, so we made it in the official languages of Canada and Japan, English, French, and Japanese. We have collected over 100 responses from students and professors, which is a substantial sample size.
We asked what are the biggest problems in learning and teaching and select the 3 issues from 12 problems. Top 2 issues are over 60 and the rest of the 3 are over 40. We can find the similarities that most concern top 1, top 3, top 5 have resulted from the communication problems. We wanted to factor in mental health too, not just schoolwork.
Here are some of the popular comments from the survey. As you can see, many students find it difficult to discern between free time and school time, or they save more time because they don't have to commute and they could watch lectures whenever it works best for them. Also, we found it interesting that most of the comments from Japanese students are quite positive, but on the other hand, many of Canadian students seems to be not satisfied with their situation. Based on the affirmation and concerns, we have created a 4-step policy. They are as followed: technology, communication, post-COVID learning, and health.
As you can see from the slide, clearly, most participants are not ecstatic about continuing with online school, given the population average was 2.68 out of 5, but this will be a necessity.
Just quickly, the results also yielded a test statistic of 1.13 when comparing Japan and Canada, which means that there was no statistically significant indication of a difference between Canada and Japan. So another thing is that we noticed that the governments of Canada and Japan both have instructional policies for university, but many of them did not align with the biggest results from our survey. So given that most of the concerns were related to technology and communication, we focused our project on digital resilience. Digital resiliency is an investment in online education with a proper emphasis on the science behind learning. In a post-secondary context, this means reevaluating current technology systems, adopting new systems, and implementing long-term systems to strengthen online learning.
Now, we look at individual problems in detail. There is a problem that multiple applications like Discord and Google Classroom cause students and teachers to mess up because too many applications are difficult to manage. To solve this problem, the government should create a standardized SNS platform for student engagement in each university. This platform aims to promote communication between students and professors. Also, before every semester, students get a questionnaire from the university where they will be able to say if they have a problem or accommodations. Universities should allocate budget for students who do not have resources.
Another aspect of the technological policy would be to create a lifeline that connects professors to the government so that they are more directly represented, which will allow for professors to have a greater influence on education policy. Also, the government should try to research ways to engage students by creating surveys that are related to certain issues that students have. Another policy that needs to be discussed is communication. Communication, specifically the development of a standardized program of communication between students and professors, and interdepartmental communication involving methods of course instruction for professors.
The third focus that we should focus on is the future of hybrid learning. We encourage the government to research private sector technology solutions for simultaneously in-person and online classes. This entails an investment in virtual programs that allow for more interaction in virtual activities such as labs and extracurriculars outside of Zoom. This ameliorates two of our survey concerns by increasing hands-on activities and solving motivation problems through ascertaining student insights.
The last policy is health. We need to take into consideration physical health. We need to also take into consideration mental health like stress, fatigue, anxiety, especially for people with disabilities. We need to consider their general health as they're affected differently. Overall, we believe these policies cover all the biggest concerns. From our presentation, we learned that we need to listen to our students and professors to create a strong digital community that is empathetic and successful. Our policies that we have highlighted supplement hybrid learning, which is a great step for future education systems of Japan and Canada. Lastly, simply with our survey that received 104 responses, we were able to listen to our communities both in Canada and Japan. So change is possible, and I believe we have a bright future ahead.
Here are our exterior research findings, and we were able to provide an Excel sheet of raw data and a data summary at your request.
That's all for our presentation. Thank you for listening.
That was fascinating. I'm looking at your question or suggestion of a standardized SNS and reflecting back on Princess Takamoto's common ground. So what about something like a digital commons? So when you talk about, can you describe in more detail this concept of a standardized SNS or digital commons?
What we were referring to that is basically a platform in which students can conduct online work, such as D2L, which is a common usage in Canada. Also, they can communicate to the government and with their professors through that specific medium. This is already a feature somewhat in different applications, but the government hasn't made it a point to make sure this is widespread and readily available in most institutions. So we just wanted to encourage the government to create or invest in a pre-existing technology that would allow for an effective medium of communication throughout all levels of the institution.
Thank you. I would first like to say how pleased I was to hear that you acknowledged health in terms of not only physical health, but mental health, and in particular things like Zoom fatigue, as well as eyesore, which I believe we're going to hear more about in the long term. My question, however, is about communication. And so communication, of course, occurs both horizontally as well as vertically. And so it is quite a complex area. And I wonder if you could tease out your ideas in a little bit more detail to capture some of that complexity.
When it comes to communication, what we kind of found from our own experience doing the survey is that we need to consider having various forms of connecting with people. For example, like in our survey, we had questions where it was simply yes or no questions, but we also offered them comment section. So as you saw on our slides, we had Japanese and Canadian students making comments. So we not only looked at maybe asking them questions, but just getting feedback as well. So making sure communication is not just one flat note where it's just yes or no. It's more various techniques of asking for feedback between professors. So we also talked to part-time professors and full-time professors. So we kind of looked at different demographics and people. We even spoke to students with disabilities, students that are full-time, part-time. So there was different balance of students. So I think when it comes to communication and trying to figure that out, it's about not only asking a various cultural of people, different background of people and experiences, but also different format of communication.
And if I could add on to that in like a contextual sense, for example, through the SNS site, we could have different portals for different purposes. So students could access a portal specifically to talk to professors, a portal to talk to other students. And also, Rico mentioned we wanted to encourage interdepartmental communication. So professors could also use that as a medium to communicate.
In your presentation of your data, of your results, you indicated that the Japanese students tended to be less critical than the students from Canada. And I'm wondering if that had anything to do or why that might be the case. And I was particularly interested in consideration of environmental factors.
I think we had a positive comment, remote learning from Japanese students, because they were positive about finding extra times for studying and doing their own things inside of home and have a communication with their families.
It really depended on person to person, but I think generally one of the reasons why the Japanese students found greater success with managing the structure is that the Canadian government didn't specifically give an instruction as whether to continue classes asynchronously or synchronously, and it depended on each class. So that was definitely a big factor in the Canadian experience and why me and many of my friends, as well as the 104 people from the survey, did find difficulty in managing their time with classes.
I can quickly just add on to that, like from looking at my community, like the example I provided in Kingston, the schools, when they were shut down, there was no plan given for how they should be doing online work. Like we're looking at either really young students or even students in university, there was no backup plan provided. So that kind of speaks to the level of unpreparedness here in Canada for moving into that transition during COVID. And I think that speaks to different environments, either it being here in Kingston or in Canada compared to Japan.
I'll add a quick, my opinion. Some people don't like online learning because Japanese college students don't have education of technology learning. So some first year and second student are not familiar to manipulating computers. So that is one factor of problem.
You talked about digital resilience. Do you think maybe in thinking about it, the question Alenka asked, does Canada and Japan have different sort of interpretations of the word resilience?
I would say that based on the survey results from the Canadian students, digital resiliency or just their concerns in general were more targeted towards technology and security concerns, such as using methods of communications like the one we are using right now. We didn't ascertain any, or many rather, opinions from Japanese students who had that mindset. From my belief, it's that Canadian students are more concerned with their personal information coming under attack from, let's say, inefficient online communication methods. But we really didn't have that insight from Japanese students. So there was obviously some limitations to the survey in that aspect.